Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we engage in this virtual event. Fortunately, we have three technical experts here on hand, myself, Barbara Morgan, and Ray Benson. I'm Steve Davis. I am the literary curator for the Wittliff Collections at Texas State University. Thank you very much for joining us for this special session we have devoted to the great Shrake. The place I work at, the Wittliff Collections, has literary papers for many of the major writers from Texas and the Southwest, including Sandra Cisneros and Cormac McCarthy, and also Bud Shrake. And Bud, who died in 2009 at the age of 76, was a prolific, larger-than-life legend during his lifetime. And he's only let off the gas a little bit after his death. We're here to talk about his brand new book, Hollywood Mad Dogs, the manuscript for which exists in his archive at the Wittliff Collections. As Jane Sumner noted of this book in her recent essay in the Austin American Statesman, Shrake has come roaring back to life with a crisp novel inspired real-life manic adventures as a screenwriter in the 1970s and 80s Tinseltown. This new book is part of the Wittliff Collections literary series with Texas A&M University Press. We are so grateful to Bud's sons, Ben Shrake and Alan Shrake, for helping support the publication of this book. You've seen that the official bookseller for the San Antonio Festival is Nowhere Bookshop. We ask that you support the book festival and this independent bookstore by purchasing your copies of Hollywood Mad Dogs from Nowhere. Just click on the Buy the Book button on the festival site. This book is so much fun that you'll want to get two of them. Now, you'll see the Q&A button. We are reserving some time at the end of the session for questions, so feel free to type in whatever questions come to mind. To talk about this extraordinary writer and his new book, we're joined by two distinguished friends of Bud Shrake. We have Ray Benson, an icon of Texas music, who is the modern king of Western swing and the driving force behind the legendary band Asleep at the Wheel. Ray has won more Grammy Awards than his big arms can comfortably hold. He's also the author of a terrific memoir, Coming Right at Ya, How a Jewish Hippie Went Country, or the often outrageous history of Asleep at the Wheel. Ray has generously donated his complete archive to the Wittliff Collections Texas Music Collection. And actually right now we have a major exhibition of Ray's complete archive that's on display. And Ray, what sort of things would people see when they come up to check out this exhibition of your collection?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, what can they see? Well, I donated all the papers. There's a lot of my wardrobes from movies and stuff like that. And the most interesting thing is I had all the calendars from 1972 to 1984, where I wrote down the shows, the thing, and scribbled in the columns, and it really blew my mind. And I lived it. You go back and all of a sudden you look at these comics made in a show in San Jose, California, in 1972. For the band, and $86 for the band, and it's amazing. And all Bud stuff is there, and Bill Wittliff, obviously, and all the Lonesome Dove stuff, and photography collections that are just incredible. So and my motorcycle is there. My 1969 Harley Davidson is sitting in there so that I won't ride it on the streets and get killed. So we figured it was safer there at the Wittliff, and it is. If you don't care about me or nothing, it's a good bike to go look at.
Yeah, it's quite.
Okay, I'm going to throw in my two. Here's my favorite thing about the Ray Benson collection up there, which was a little startling at first, but it was so much fun. So I just kept going around and around. They have the most amazing setup now in the new space where Ray's collection is, that has this audio cone above your head. And so when you walk into a certain spot close to the actual exhibit, Ray starts talking to you like he's above your shoulder, because he's always above your shoulder anyway, right? So it's pretty crazy. And it feels like Ray is right there with you. And here's one of his calendars that he's talking about on my phone. I was so impressed with them. I was taking pictures of them because it was like, man, that's awesome. Anyway, you got to go see the collection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got
And
the from Maxwell Smart, the cone of silence from the Maxwell Smart.
that's what it
I loved it.
I'd have to ask Hector if that's where that came from.
And you've heard from Barbara Morgan, our other guest today. Barbara is the brilliant co-founder of the Austin Film Festival and the longtime executive director of that film festival, which has done so much to help transform Austin into one of the nation's creative capitals. Barbara is a filmmaker herself, and like Ray Benson, she is a generous donor to the Wittliff Collections. And Barb, can you take just a moment to tell people who aren't familiar about the Austin Film Festival what it is you guys do?
Yeah, we are the first Writers Film Festival. So we started 28 years ago. And of course, the Wittliff Collections, pretty awesome place. We too were helped amazingly by Bill Wittliff and Sally Wittliff. And Bill as a screenwriter jumped in and helped us right when we started. So we're, we collected all of our materials over the years and we donated them to the collection. So if you love writing, that's what the festival's about.
Yeah. Okay, great. And as we talk about, I want to take just a moment to set the stage a bit for people who aren't especially familiar with Bud. He is one of the most fascinating writers to ever come from Texas. Bud had this heightened, almost mystical, cosmic perspective combined with this really deeply subversive and ironic sense of humor. It was quite wonderful. And Barbara and I were talking earlier about Bud. What she says, Bud was a magnet. He was a magnet for the most interesting things. And it's true. This is a guy who's dating Jack Ruby's star stripper at the time of the Kennedy assassination. He went on to spend the last 25 years of his life as the partner of Ann Richards. And in between, he wrote some of the coolest novels that come from Texas. He also co-wrote Willie Nelson's autobiography. He was the co-author of Harvey Penick's Little Red Book, the best-selling sports book of all time. He was a star literary writer at Sports Illustrated for about 20 years, and then left that to spend about 15 years writing more than 40 screenplays for Hollywood. Bud began with Dennis Hopper, ended up with Steve McQueen. There were a few detours along the way, such as his Vampire Bat movie, which Bud expected to be regarded as a classy Vampire Bat movie. Didn't quite work out exactly that way. Bud also appeared on screen several times. He made his debut as Town Drunk in Kid Blue. He later won the coveted role of Sodbuster 2 in Lonesome Dove, where he gets shot, hanged, and burned after just a few seconds on screen. Shortly before he died, Bud completed his final manuscript. This was his long-awaited Hollywood novel, based on his experiences with McQueen, who was secretly dying of cancer at the time he and Bud worked together to complete what became McQueen's final film, Tom Horn. As with many of Bud's novels, there's a whole lot of truth in here, though many names were changed to prevent lawsuits. And so, Barb and Ray, you guys both knew Bud quite well and saw him regularly. Did you know that he was working on this book?
No, I knew he was working though because what I live real close to Bud, and so on my way home, pretty much every time I would pull into Wildcat Hollow and knock on, if his car was there, knock on the door, and I'd go in and some days the cars would be there and I'd knock on the door and ain't no answer, and I go, oh, Bud's working on something. And so yes, and he knew that his time was short, so he was working.
Yeah, I did actually. He'd shared the book with me in its early draft, because he was trying to figure out what to do with it. And like Ray said, he was, when he knew he had cancer, he really started pumping stuff out. He talked about Steve McQueen over the years, but never to the degree that I read in the book. Oh, whoops, am I not supposed to say that? Anyway, sorry. But anyway, he had talked about his escapades, let's put it that way, during that time period. And And so, yeah, he was trying to figure out what to do with that book there. And he wrote it really quickly.
Yeah. And Ray, did Bud tell you many Hollywood stories? Did he talk about that much with you when you guys were golfing together or just visiting or whatever?
Oh yeah, you know, it was always like, are you kidding me? You know, I mean, there's so amazing things, not just Hollywood, well, just his life. I mean, good God, you know, the story that I think Barbie probably was the one about Carlos Monzon.
Oh yeah.
The great boxer, when he went down to cover that, and he wrote a play about it, and we did a table read of that over after he passed away, and I played the guitar because I was the soundtrack. But he went down there to cover the Carlos Monzon, and where was it? Which was that? The Pinochet or with one of the?
Yeah, it was in Argentina in the late '70s. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're throwing people off the airplanes into the disappeared, you know, and he somehow gets has a drink with the wrong person, he gets put in jail, and it's the most amazing story. The Hollywood stuff, a lot of the stuff, you know, I remember when they were writing Beverly Hills Cop, him and Dan Jenkins were writing it, and of course it came out London Cop or something. Anyway, you know, talk about how you get paid to do all this stuff, but they're never going to put your name on the movie regardless of the fact that that's it. And of course we had going back to Kid Blue. I'm sorry, it was Electric Blue. Yeah, the other one.
Kid Blue. Yeah, it was Kid Blue.
No, but the Electric Glide Blue too. I believe it worked on that, and a friend of mine had taken the movie away from the original director when that happens quite a bit. And like say, Bud just sits there and goes, you know, it was a great lesson in what happens to a writer's work once they've turned it in and they've been paid. It's like, all right, out the back door, which you know. So it was you know, being a screenwriter. I mean, you know. The great thing about Bud was he was able to make a lot of money writing. He spent it all, but writing and having a great time. But he was a novelist. I mean, for crying out loud, you know, going back the early books, they're really crazy. Straight Peaches and Blessed McGill and all those. Yeah. But then you go to the later stuff in it. And, you know, I've explained it to somebody this way. I said Bud wrote Western novels with a Elizabethan kind of cadence. You know, the Borderland is my favorite book. Custer's Brothers, of course. These later books are just I think they show his incredible maturity. You know, of writing, you know, of a lifetime of experience in writing. But the stories, yeah, of course, you know. Yeah, sure. That, you know, about playing poker with Weiland and all the guys and what went on, but you know, well, those were the days, you know. And yeah, of course, you mentioned the whole Dallas Kennedy assassination craziness. He had that club, the Cowboy. It was a Cowboy Club, I guess it was Cowboys Club. I mean, it was the center of, you know, of Dallas Cowboy football party life, which was just read Pete Gent's book for crying out loud, North Dallas 40, and Bud's in every scene of that book.
Yeah, and Tom Horn though. Tom Horn is really a great movie if you haven't had a chance to see it. I mean, it's such an interesting Western, especially when you kind of look at it through Bud's lens, you know. So.
Did Bud talk to you on that part? Did Bud talk to you about?
He did. He talked a lot about McQueen and that whole process, and it was really, I think, the introduction to that world. Writing that script, like kind of seeing all that LA really was underneath the surface. I think he just got the full immersion on that book. I mean, on that project, and you know, hence hence the book. And it was funny though, because when he would talk about it, it was clear that, it finally bubbled up in a way that Bud could express it to us with his usual amount of humor mixed in that cynicism, I mean, that's what made him so funny, because he just told the truth. But it always had a little flair to it, and I'm sure largely what you read in the book is what really happened,
I just want to mention a couple of things. So there's a screenwriter who gets drawn into Hollywood, whose name is Richard Swift, who seems an awful lot like Bud Shrake, who's this movie star named Jack Roach, who seems an awful lot like Steve McQueen. And there are just so many, manic scenes as these guys are partying together, for days and nights and weeks on end. And Bud's character, the screenwriter, is getting really nervous because they haven't done anything on the script. And he keeps trying to ask the movie star, are we ever going to actually work on it? And here's what Jack Roach tells him. He says, "Hey, Richard, we're doing the real writing now, talking the story, hanging out together, learning each other. Putting words on paper is just the typing part of it." Yeah, just those kinds of things. And of course, he eventually gets locked in a hotel room for a week and given a big bag of cocaine and told not to come out till he's done with the script. So, is there much exaggeration here, you think? Or is this kind of how it was?
No,
I don't know. You were there, Ray. You go for it.
No, of course. It was never finished a dead. That's the mantra of all of us. Is that there are. I'm not going to mention any names, but there are people who do actually write outlines, get the thing done, that boom, boom, boom. But my estimation was we always were working, and so you got piles of stuff going on, but until you have a deadline for a really good reason, you're probably not going to finish anything. So the partying was home, what I called homework. And it really was. And I mean, I'll harken back to Harlan Howard, one of the great country western songwriters, and they said, "Well, why aren't you going around to the different publishers and doing the business or the author would go around all the publishers? You should be hanging out, going to cocktail parties, offices and good business." And he says, "No, you know what? I'd do better if I go to a down and out bar and listen to some down and out person telling me some story about their life, or I can sit around and watch somebody." It's all about being a voyeur and then taking it all in and figuring it out. So that's why I say, people said hanging out is art. I mean, it really is. And if you are to hang out with Bud Shrake and Nick Kroll and all the guys who he's talking about, Jerry Jeff Walker, etc., there was and then Dennis Hopper and Stephen Cook, all the guys. So to hang out with the guys, you gotta be, I don't know how to put it, except you gotta be accepted, you gotta be cool. What? I don't know. Certainly, you can't buy your way in, and you have to have talent. You gotta be interesting, and then you hang out, and I think that's the thing at Bud. Everybody went to Bud because he was so damn interesting, and had such great life experiences. So and then you get to share them with them. Says, "Hey, yeah, Bud, I almost got killed this week too."
He did write a lot, like to Ray's point, he wrote a lot of his great stuff out of just hanging out, right? Strange Peaches, this book, Limo. He did a lot. Billy Boy, they were, Harvey Penick, even as Willie Nelson. But I mean, Bud really kind of made a career out of his hanging out. So that's pretty amazing.
The songwriter movie, he wrote the script, the songwriter.
Right,
and
right.
I was kind of down and out, and so I went over to their house while they were shooting. Alan Rudolph was the director, and I'd worked with him on something. And so I go over there to hang out with Willie and smoke a joint at the house. And we're swimming, and he goes, "What you doing?" "Oh, we're filming today." I said, "Oh, really? I'll go sign up for an extra. I'll get $50 and a meal." And I go over, and Alan Rudolph goes, "Wait a minute, what are you doing here?" Because I'd done a movie with him. Well, I got a speaking part. But that movie was our life. Songwriter, all Bud did was say, "Okay, there's Gino McCausland that Rip Torn played." Gino McCausland was the guy, ran the club, 57 Doors, and the Western Place, and then promoted shows. And so Bud went, "Oh, well, there's your character." And Willie went, "Yeah, we'll just do this," and told all the stories, because it really was a Wild West in the 70s in the music. So the Bud just hung around. I remember his one story about we would go everywhere, and Gino booked the Sportatorium in Dallas. That was where they had wrestling, and it was a big metal building where they had wrestling for, Dory Funk and George and those kind of. And we did a show there, and the fire marshal wouldn't let anybody else in. It was sold out. Willie, us, and somebody. And so Gino went and took the men's room and the ladies' room, and put them on the exit door. And then when he went out, he put the door and couldn't get back in, and he sold 20 more tickets to the folks waiting in line. So that became part of the script, and it was so yeah, a lot of it is documentary film fictionalized.
Yeah. So we have so many questions. I want to get to some of these here while we have time. So Natalie asked, what do you think Steve McQueen saw in Bud? Why did he choose him as his creative partner, his final creative partner? Someone who could contribute to his legacy in some way.
I don't know. He like, of course, I would not have the real answer to that question, right? But I'm gonna throw my guess in there. Ray, you feel free to contradict me, but Bud was the kind of guy that you didn't have to be around him very long to know. He just did what the hell he wanted to do, and he really didn't give a damn what anybody thought. And so, those are kind words that I just said. Not the real words I would normally use if we weren't on TV. And so I've never met very many people who exuded that to the degree that Bud did. He really just wasn't worried about people's impressions. And I think to a guy like Steve McQueen, Bud was the real deal. That's how I viewed it. Steve McQueen was an actor. Bud wasn't an actor. So
yeah, I'll tell you that the reason why is because Bud, on every situation I ever seen, had the best opening line. I mean, when he meets it, line, and that's usually, and then he'd back it up. So, okay, I still remember the first time I met him in 1973 or 4, and this guy comes up. Now I'm a lot younger than Bud, and it's 1973, so I was 22 years old, I guess. And here comes this fella who looked to me like kind of like a professor. He had on a tweed jacket with patches and everything, and we had this old double-decker Greyhound Sooner Cruiser bus, and we had played a gig, and he said, "Hey, we'd like to rent your bus to go to, I think, Nick Kroll's birthday, somebody's birthday, drive it up to Dallas." Now, ladies and gentlemen, this bus broke down every other mile, literally, and luckily we said, "Nah, we better not take the bus." But he was a stranger to me, but he walked up, and he had the best opening line, and I've seen him do this a number of times, where you just go, "Oh, this guy's very interesting. I wonder what's going on." And I think people understood that. I mean, listen, we ran the gamut of discussion when we would talk about religion, politics, golf, women, life, writing. I mean, he was just an encyclopedia of ideas.
Yeah. And I remember Bud telling me about, McQueen had read Blessed McGill and was really taken with that novel.
Yeah.
Of course, the character McGill does die in the end, just like in Tom Horn. But Bud got a call to come out to Hollywood like right away, and he said he, really didn't have time to change clothes even, because he just jetted out instantly. And he was wearing these old jeans that he had on maybe for a couple of days, wrinkled shirt, and he came into this, Hollywood producer's office, and he looked like hell basically. And then he said he was sitting there, and then all of a sudden he realized, oh man, I look like hell. I should have probably dressed up more for Steve McQueen. And then McQueen walked in, and he was dressed the same way as Bud. So, good.
Well, and he was a presence too, wasn't he? He was 6'6", right? So in Hollywood, he was a giant, So, like, right, like you guys probably walking into a room were overwhelming to people.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I had done that movie with Dolly Parton, co-starred with her, and I figure I'm going to be I'll get me an agent, Jim Wyatt. So I'll call him up, be my agent, everything. And so anyway, nope, nothing's coming in. And so when he had the book, The Borderland, I'm over there, and he goes, well, I got some good news and bad news from my agent. What was the good news? He says a top flight, #1 Hollywood actor wants to option the book for a movie, and he wants to play the part of the 6'4" Texas Ranger that is the protagonist in the novel. And I said, well, that's great. And he said, yeah, who is it? He said, who is it? He said, Sylvester Stallone. He was 5'2" and talks like this. No way, what do you mean? And that's when I went, oh, you mean that's why I can't get a job? He said, yeah, you're fucking funny looking, you're 6'6", and you're going to stand next to who? Steve, all these short guys. So it's like George Strait, same thing. He won't even let me on stage with him. But yeah. Oh, somebody asked, is this Bud? Yeah, this is Bud Shrake in Bill Wittliff's office at 501 Baylor. Somebody typed in.
Yeah, that was Ben Fountain asked who that was, and Barb, talk about your photo behind you. It's so sweet you guys both brought these photos of.
Yeah. I've got Bud back behind me. Bud gave me this, but this was from Bill too. Bill took this photo too. So he inspires me every day. So.
Thank you, Ben Shrake, for that. Ben gave me this. So I don't know who took it, but Ben, maybe Ben did. And he got a sleep with the wheel hat on. I was getting Thanks over here with my belt.
So, and in the novel, we have this relationship between the screenwriter Richard Swift and the movie star Jack Roach, and there's a love triangle. There's this famous actress Katie Wynn, who the screenwriter falls in love with, and she had once been the lover of the movie star, and so you have this kind of interesting love triangle. I've had several people ask, is that based on any kind of real life situation? And I have no idea. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you that one. So we'll let that one stay with Bud.
Okay, the cone of silence has descended over that. Apparently. Okay, and Carmen Tafoya asked about the years Bud was screenwriting in Hollywood, and Carmen, he really began with Dennis Hopper in his first film that Bud wrote, kind of as a lark. He wrote this. He and his wife Dotsy at the time went to go see Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and she loved the movie. Bud thought it was somewhat idiotic, and he felt he could write something better, and Dotsy did not believe him. So Bud went home and spent a few days hammering out his own original script, and you guys know this story, but turned it into his agent, who was not really that impressed with it, and Bud said, at least send it to a producer and try it. And a few hours later, producer bought the script, went into production. Soon thereafter, with Dennis Hopper, we had this whole caravan of mad dogs from Austin go down to Durango, Mexico, to do the filming with a huge van load of psychedelics driven by Pete Gent, I guess. But Ray, were you part of that scene at all when that happened? What were you doing then?
I was in high school.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's came out like in 70 or 71, right? Or
No,
it came out. That's right.
in West,
Yeah.
it was in West Virginia, but no, no way. But I was younger than those guys, and but I didn't. Yeah, I'm sure that is exactly how it happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I can get
we
later.
did a screening of it.
I helped get Dennis straight, and
Oh, you did?
We did a screening of it, and we had to, like, it was really hard finding a print of that film, right? It kind of disappeared. And in fact, I can't remember, we found it in another country. And then we brought it here. Bud didn't have a copy. He didn't know we couldn't get one. And then I don't remember how we tracked it down. And we brought it back, and I had it transferred to tape. And I gave Bud a copy because that's how we had to show it too, because the print wasn't in great condition. It was somebody's private print. Yeah, and it was so much fun. We showed it at the Paramount, and Bud had a lot of stories, but I'm not sure he could remember really many of the stories that occurred from that movie. Based on some of the stories he told, I'm sure he couldn't remember some of the stories. So, but it sounded like a mad, mad, mad world, you know?
Yeah. And so what did you guys think when you read Hollywood Mad Dogs? Did you recognize the protagonist?
I think it's hard not to see Bud in all Bud's books. I think Bud's a character in all of his books. So it was hard for me to read that book again and separate the man from Richard Swift. So yeah, I don't know. I was a little nostalgic reading it, really, because I kind of felt like Bud was there for a bit. So, what about you, Ray?
I'm waiting for the book on tape.
Maybe you could read the book on tape. Why don't you read it?
The studio's downstairs. Give me the book, because I have not read the book yet, because I don't know. I haven't been out of the house, so someone's got to bring me a book. But I will do the book on tape and call the publisher right now.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. No, and it's a terrific book. It's so lively. You know what happened?
But I just, I'm still waiting for Steve Harris's text.
Yeah. And so let's check out some of our other questions. Let's see. We have a comment from Ben Shrake, who just, is so thankful to you guys for being a part of this, and of course to Texas A&M Press, our friends there in the Wittliff Collections. And Ben says, my dad told me that originally he wrote this, but he did not want to have it published because it was kind of a personal, almost like a memoir. I think when Bud first wrote this, he actually wrote it as a fake memoir by this guy named Richard Swift before he decided to call it a novel, because there is a lot of truth in there, and it really does get you kind of under the veneer of Hollywood, which Bud had written some script for Hollywood and made some good money. When he wrote that first screenplay for Kid Blue, he made more off of that than he had off of every novel he'd ever written, for a couple of weeks' work. And Bud had told me before, writing a novel is the hardest thing I've ever done. And he was such an ambitious novelist. Man, he really worked really hard to make great novels, which got nice reviews in, literary journals, but never became bestsellers. And so, Hollywood was quite a draw for him, but he wasn't really connected to Hollywood until he went out to work with McQueen. And this is really his introduction to that scene. And you have things like, they're just crazy. Okay, the novel opens where you're at this producer's house for his party, where people are doing coke off the white piano and stuff like that. But the producer's not there. He's actually in his fake house, which is next to his. Which he's actually in his real house, which is next to his fake house. And it almost is like a spy novel in some way. There's so much deceit in Hollywood and so much dishonesty. And there's this great scene in the book where Bud's character, the screenwriter, and Steve McQueen talk about this movie star, Katie Wynn, who they're both in love with. And Steve McQueen's character says to Bud, we need to go to the truth room. He has this special chamber inside his house along the Pacific coast where the two guys are both locked in the room. They get the knife and do the exchange of blood and the arms. And I think they're locked in there with just a couple of sandwiches, basically, for the duration of this encounter. And nothing but the truth is supposed to be spoken under penalty of death. And of course, as the book goes on, you find out that everybody's lying their asses off the whole time, which is just how Hollywood is. And I think Bud felt like, just to get to Ben's point, that the novel did hit a little close to home. He was told really that some of the material might be too hot to handle. We do know that in the archive, he did make an attempt to publish it just a few months before he died. His agent sent it out to a couple of publishers in New York that were interested, but weren't quite sure if they would be able to find the market for it. And so nothing ever happened with it. And then Bud died. So it did take, about 12 years to get it published. And we're thrilled to see it out today. Here's another question from Chad. This one's from Chad Hammett. As three people who all knew Bud well, why did you each think that Bud chose this subject matter for his final work? Was the knowledge that it'd be published posthumously a factor? Any thought?
I don't know. I don't think Bud knew it was his final work. Bud was really busy writing. He was just busy writing, like Ray said. The play that Ray was talking about that we did after Bud died, I was producing that with Bud. Like we were doing it, we were trying to do it when he was alive. In fact, we were going to be doing it the month after he died. And we had already set it up for that, and he was pumping stuff out. I mean, he did that play. We went to lunch one day and he said, hey, I've got something I want you to read. And I said, great, what is it? And he said, well, I've written another play. And the play was...
Oh, here we are.
Okay.
Thanks for being with us. So, Ray, let's hear, we just have about 5 minutes left. Can you just share, some stories about Bud and your time together, just to give us a sense of who this guy was?
Well, just explain when old Dennis Hopper had gotten the end of his rope on his drug addiction, and what did he do? He came down to Austin to play golf with Bud, Willie, me, and hang out and not do drugs because we had all quit long before that. And I mean, that was pretty amazing. Instead of going to rehab, he came down here and we went, look, you don't need to do that. Let's go play golf. And got him on a golf course and out at Willie's. And I was training him out because, that's what friends are, and in Hollywood, real friends are so far and few between that you could go do that. But that was Bud, I mean, he was very open with the people that he liked. He was very tolerant of people he didn't like. I've never saw him really, although he could cut somebody down pretty quick. He was always very genial, and I think that is the quality that attracts people. He was always, we play a lot of golf and with Willie, with Coach Royal, with characters, anybody, and it was, I'll tell you, the last time we played golf was with, he was good friends with Michael Rudman from London. They wrote plays together, and Michael would come in, and he flew in, and whenever before Bud died, we got to go out to play golf, and in golf you play from the back tees, the blues, the white thing, and Bud was kind of weak, so he was playing from the red tees, the forward tees, the ladies' tees, and had a great round. And then when at the funeral, I saw Dan Jenkins, and we talked about playing the thing. He said, "Yeah, Bud just ran out of tees. If we could just move up one more tee, he'd probably stay alive." was at Tinsley Penn. We played with Tinsley. He really, and golf really helped save a lot of lives, because you know, you couldn't go out, smoke pot, but you couldn't do and drink a lot and play a lot of golf at our age, and so it was a wonderful thing that do. And to that point, he wrote that beautiful Billy Boy book, which is such a great golf book. Of which golf books are it's a tough thing. If you're not a golfer, you don't read them. That one was just so cool. I don't know, man. I just a privilege to have been his friend, and was so lucky to live close that I got to bug him a lot.
Barb, any final words on Bud? We have about a minute left.
You know, he was just the guy that do you remember the Dos Equis commercial, The Most Interesting Man in the World series they did? Well, that ad agency never met Bud Shrake. So if they'd met Bud, he would have been that guy on the commercial, because he was the most interesting man in the world. He was always funny and charming, and like Ray said, he always had the best lines. And I don't think they weren't canned. They were in the moment, you know, like he absorbed whatever was going on around him, and then he spit it out through the Bud Shrake filter, and all of a sudden the world became even more interesting than it just was, you know. And he was a true and loyal friend, you know. He was a great writer, and you know, I'm terribly sad he's gone, but at least we have his stuff to keep reading now, you know. And if you are looking for the best Western in the world, it's Blessed McGill. I do love Borderlands, Ray, but I really think Blessed McGill is an amazing book.
When I read Blessed McGill age 30, my immediate reaction was, why did anybody tell me about this novel? You know, how did I not know about it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we've reached our time. So great to have you both here to talk about Bud. Thank you very much. Thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us and staying with us during little weird technical glitches here and there. Really appreciate you guys, your support for the book festival, for Nowhere Books, and for Bud Shrake. Everybody, thanks again. Take care.
It's great to see you guys. Yeah.
Adios.